All right, welcome back for the second part of One Man's Faith. We are looking at the at the Feast of Israel, the last three in particular, and what effect they could have on us. Okay, what effect they could have. So, let me build my case, and then let's see where that goes. I want to look at and meld into this cycles of seven. If you've been around Christianity for any period of time, you know that seven is the number of completion. Seven is kind of the number of God. Okay, 3 is also associated with God, but 7 seems to be completion. And if you'll think back to Genesis 1, each day goes, and there was evening and there was morning, a first day, a second day, a third day, a fourth day, a fifth day. Notice there was evening and morning. Look at your Bible, you'll see this. This is the way God thinks. That's why the Jewish calendar and their days go from the evening to evening. Like Yom Kippur will start Tuesday evening and go to Wednesday evening. That's how their days are set up. And then in Genesis 2, verse 1, it says, "Thus the heavens and the earth were completed and all their host. By the seventh day, God completed his work which he had done, and he rested on the seventh day from all his work which he had done. Then God blessed the seventh day and sanctified it, because in it he rested from all his work which God had created and made." Okay, so we have in this case, a 6-day policy. Okay, God worked 6 days. He created things for 6 days. Now, I don't know why we can't believe he did it in 6 days. Why do we have to associate it with billions of years or even 6,000? I heard one guy say the other day that he believes that God created the world in 6,000 years. Why? Why can't we assume that God, the Almighty God, created things in days? Why is that so hard for us to comprehend? Can't we take God at his word that he was 6 days, that he created things on a day, set things up, and in the 6th day he created man, and then he rested. He rested. Keeping that in mind, God worked 6 days. We have the commands in Exodus 20. The 10 commandments, okay? One of the 10 commandments in verse 8 of Exodus 20 says, "Remember the Sabbath day to keep it holy. 6 days you shall labor and do all your work. But the 7th day is a Sabbath of the Lord your God. In it you shall not do any work, you or your son or your daughter or your male or your female servant or your cattle or your sojourner who stays with you. For in 6 days," it goes on, God did all his work, and then he rested on the 7th. So God started by saying, okay, I worked 6 days, I took a 7th off. Now, you are created in my image. You will work 6 days and you will take 1 day off in reverence of what I did and to give you a break from your work. Okay? Now, Leviticus 23 again, talking about one of the feasts, says this: "You shall also count for yourselves from the day after the Sabbath." Now remember, it's talking about the fact that during the Passover, unleavened bread, first fruits week, so to speak, it starts with Passover. The next day starts the Feast of Unleavened Bread, which goes for 7 days. Somewhere during that 7th day, those 7 days will be a Sabbath, a Shabbat, okay? And so he's saying here, you shall count for yourselves from the day after the Sabbath, from the day when you brought in the sheaf of the wave offering, there shall be 7 complete Sabbaths, okay? You shall count 50 days to the day after the 7th Sabbath. Then you shall present a new grain offering to the Lord. This is called Shavuot or Pentecost. It starts on the day after the Sabbath that falls during that week of unleavened bread. And you count from that Sabbath 7 Sabbaths out, which is 49 days. And then on the 50th day, you shall present a grain offering to the Lord. That is called Pentecost. Shavuot, the Feast of Weeks, Pentecost. Those are the names for that. So notice, God set up 6 days, 1 day a Sabbath. Now he's saying, okay, I want you to count 7 Sabbaths, 7 weeks. And the day after the 7th Sabbath will be the 50th day, and you will present an offering. That's the day of Pentecost. Okay, in Leviticus 25, the Lord then spoke to Moses at Mount Sinai, saying, speak to the sons of Israel and say to them, when you come into the land which I give you, then the land shall have a Sabbath of the Lord. 6 years you shall sow your field, and 6 years you shall prune your vineyard and gather in its crops. But during the 7th year, the land shall have a Sabbath rest. A Sabbath to the Lord. You shall not sow your fields or prune your vineyard. Your harvest after growth you shall not reap, and your grapes of untrimmed vines you shall not gather. The land shall have a sabbatical year. Okay, man works 6 days, rest on the 7th. Man goes 7 Sabbaths, and the day after is an offering. Now, the land will only be worked 6 years, and at the 7th year, the land will not be worked. It will have a rest. The land. Man will have a rest. Now, the land will have a rest. Okay? All right. In Leviticus 25, verse 8, it says, you are also to count off 7 Sabbaths of years for yourself, 7 times 7 years, so that you have the time of the 7 Sabbaths of years, namely 49 years. You shall then sound a ram's horn abroad on the 10th day of the 7th month. Anybody remember what the 10th day of the 7th month is? Yom Kippur. Day of Atonement. On the Day of Atonement, you shall sound a horn all through your land. You shall thus consecrate the 50th year and proclaim a release through the land to all its inhabitants. It shall be a jubilee for you. And each of you shall return to his own property, and each of you shall return to his own family. You shall have a 50th year as a jubilee. You shall not sow, nor reap its aftergrowth, nor gather in from its untrimmed vines. For it is a jubilee. It shall be holy to you. You shall eat its crops out of the field. Okay. God worked 6 days, rested on the seventh. He said, man, you will work 6 days and rest on the seventh. And every year, from the Sabbath that falls during the Feast of Unleavened Bread, count 7 Sabbaths, and on the 50th day shall be a wave offering, which we call Pentecost. Okay? Then he says, okay, you will work the land for 6 years, and the 7th year it will have a rest. And you will count out 7 Sabbaths of years, i.e., he said 49, and on the 50th year will be a year of Jubilee. Now, each of those 7s, you will work at 6 and rest on the 7th, is called a Shemitah, Hebrew word. And those 7-year cycle, that 7-year cycle is called a Shemitah. The land will be worked 6 years, and on the 7th year it will rest. Then he says, now go out 7 Shemitahs, 7 sevens, 49 years. And in the 50th year, it will be a year of Jubilee. You will not work the land. Now, we count out 7 sevens. That last 7 ends on a 7, and that 7th year is a Shemitah year, which means the land doesn't get worked. So on the 49th year, the land doesn't get worked. The 50th year is a year of Jubilee, and the land does not get worked. 2 years. The land does not get worked. Okay? You talk about Jehovah Jireh. He had better be, if he's calling for 2 Sabbath years. That's what happens, okay? You got 7 years. At the end of 7 years, or in that 7th year, the land rests. You go out 7 more years. On the 7th year, which is the 14th year, the land rests. You go out 7 years. On the 24th year, the land rests. You go out 7 years, and at 32, is that right? Yeah, 6 sevens. Yeah, and so you go out, and at each one of those. Now on the last 7 years, the 49th year is a rest, and the 50th year is a rest. Okay, so let's take a rest. Let's take a break. I'll be right back.